Sunday, September 27, 1942. 500 Marines were trapped, surrounded, outgunned, and running out of time. When Chesty Puller, the baddest Marine to ever wear the uniform, calls in an SOS for immediate extraction, you know things went sideways. One man didn't wait for orders and didn't ask for backup. He didn't even ask for permission. He just said, "I'll go." He wasn't a rifleman or a general. He was a 22-year-old kid, a coastie, and he drove a landing craft. Under a storm of bullets and mortars, he led a flotilla of Higgins boats straight into hell, then parked his boat between the Marines and the enemy's guns, using it as a shield. Shrapnel tore the air, and men screamed for cover, but he never flinched, barking orders, leading the evacuation with ice in his veins. All while laying down cover fire like an absolute madman. Water erupted with mortar blasts and machine gun fire, and as the last Marine scrambled aboard, a round slammed into the base of his skull. As blood poured from his wound, he looked up at his best friend and asked just one thing. Did they get off? When Louis B. Chesty Puller joined the Marine Corps in 1918, he had no idea his legacy would be forever linked to a Coast Guardsman who hadn't even been born yet. Too late for World War I, Puller earned his stripes in the 1920s and early 30s, fighting guerrillas in Haiti and Nicaragua. By the time the U.S. entered World War II in 1941, he was already a legend in the making, decorated, battle-tested, and feared. Meanwhile, John Basilone was forging his own path. Born in 1916, he enlisted in the Army in 1934 and was sent to the Philippines, where he trained troops and manned machine guns under the tropical sun. They called him Manila John. After his discharge in 1937, he returned home, but not for long. In 1940, with war on the horizon, he joined the Marines, determined to be in the thick of it. And then there was Douglas Munro. Born in 1919 in Vancouver, British Columbia, to an American father and British mother, Munro's family moved to South Clay Elum, Washington, when he was just 3 years old. Quiet, determined, and selfless from a young age, he enrolled at Central Washington College of Education in Ellensburg, preparing for a life of service. But when war loomed in 1939, he left school and enlisted in the United States Coast Guard. He told his sister it was because the Coast Guard's mission was saving lives. And on a beach in the South Pacific, their paths would collide, where the world's premier life-saving service and the world's premier life-taking service would be bound forever in blood. In training, Douglas Munro met 18-year-old Raymond Joseph Evans Jr., and the two became best friends. As apprentice seamen, they earned just $21 a month. Together, they volunteered for duty aboard the Coast Guard cutter Spencer, training as signalmen, putting them at the communication crossroads between the Coast Guard and Navy. In June 1941, with war looming, the Navy requested Coast Guard crews to man 3 new attack transports. Hearing that the USS Hunter Liggett needed signalmen, Munro and Evans begged to transfer, pleading for days before their commanding officer finally let them go. Built for amphibious assaults, attack transports carried landing craft, but lacked operators. Munro and Evans volunteered as small boat coxswains to run the 36-foot Higgins boats, plywood hulls, twin 30 cals, and the most dangerous seats in the Pacific. On August 7, 1942, Evans landed Marines on Guadalcanal, while Munro ferried grunts into battle at Tulagi. Weeks later, the two were back together, deep in the fight on Guadalcanal. As signalmen, they kept Marines and warships linked, making sure firepower hit where it was needed. On September 27th, Munro and Evans led a flotilla of 8 Higgins boats and 2 tank landing craft. Their mission, ferry 500 Marines from 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, Chesty Puller's unit in what would become the legendary 1st Marine Division, across the Matanikau River to assault entrenched Japanese positions. Among them was a young machine gunner named John Basilone, who would soon earn the nickname Manila John. But things went sideways fast. The 2 supporting battalions had already been repelled and pulled back, but the message never reached Puller. His Marines were now cut off, surrounded by a superior Japanese force, and faced total annihilation. Cut off from radio contact, the Marines used their T-shirts to spell "Help" on the ridge, a signal spotted by a Navy scout plane. While Munro and Evans were offloading wounded onto the USS Monson, word came down. The Marines were surrounded and in serious danger. Without waiting for orders, Munro looked at his good friend Ray, grabbed the radio and said, "I'll go." Then he turned the flotilla around. The Japanese had begun to tighten their noose. Puller ordered his Marines to punch through and fight their way to the beach. With too few boats, Munro and Evans made multiple runs, piloting with one hand and firing with the other. The pinned-down Marines, including two future legends, Chesty Puller and John Basilone, couldn't believe what they were seeing. As the last Higgins boat packed with Marines ran aground on a reef, the Japanese concentrated all their fire on it. 22-year-old Coast Guardsman Douglas Munro, cold as ice, ordered another craft to rig a tow line and haul it free. While directing the entire evacuation under fire, he maneuvered his own boat between the enemy and the stranded Marines, using it as a shield. Then, Munro held the line, dead center in the kill zone, firing his .30 caliber machine gun like a madman possessed, refusing to let the enemy get a shot at the Marines. As the final boat was pulled off the reef and the evacuation neared completion, Evans spotted waterspouts marching toward them, enemy machine gun bursts bracketing the water. He shouted, "Doug, get down!" But the engine noise swallowed his voice. A burst of fire slammed into Munro. One round struck the base of his skull. He collapsed. Evans rushed to his side. Cradling his best friend, he saw the back of Munro's head was gone. With his last breath, Munro asked, "Did they get off?" Evans nodded. Munro smiled, and then he was gone.
And the beach at that time was just a most chaotic place you would have imagined, with all the shells falling in there, machine gun fire, mortar fire.
He saved a battalion of Marines.
And nobody in his right mind would start a boat to come in voluntarily to get us. I mean, at least that's my opinion. But they did. They came in.
Doug was facing forward, and I was standing up by the coxswain looking back. I saw this line of water spouts coming across the water, and I yelled at Doug to get down. He couldn't hear me over the engine noise, and it hit him. It was one burst of fire, and that's how he died. And that's how it happened.
When the dust settled on Guadalcanal, the battle wasn't just won, it was survived. But the rescue of those 500 Marines didn't fade into the background. Chesty Puller made damn sure of it. Puller, not a man known for sentiment, had seen plenty of bravery. But what Munro did that day hit different. After the campaign, he personally wrote up Douglas Munro for the Medal of Honor. Not just for guts under fire, but for saving the fight. The 500 Marines Munro pulled off that beach weren't just survivors, they were the backbone of the next push. Their survival was vital to the American victory on Guadalcanal. John Basilone, one of those rescued, would make his own mark just weeks later, holding the line at Henderson Field with a machine gun and a spine of steel. For that, he'd earned the Medal of Honor too. His legend was born in blood, but it only existed because Munro got him off that beach alive. Chesty Puller went on to lead Marines through some of the toughest fights of World War II and later returned to command in Korea, where he led the 1st Marines through the frozen hell of Chosin Reservoir. It was there, under fire, that a Marine officer reportedly shouted to his men, "Remember that guy from the Coast Guard who died for us at Guadalcanal? Don't let him down." Because the Marines never forgot. For the rest of their lives, they told anyone who'd listen that they owed everything to a Coast Guard signalman with a heart bigger than any battlefield. Munro didn't live to see his medal. Instead, in May 1943, his mother, Edith Munro, stood in his place. She accepted the Medal of Honor from President Roosevelt. And she didn't stop there. At 48, she joined the Coast Guard herself, enlisting in the Women's Reserve, the Spars, serving through the end of the war in honor of her son. Douglas Munro's legacy endures, not just in honors, but in the very fabric of the Coast Guard. His name graces the cutter Douglas Munro, Munro Hall at the Coast Guard Academy, and a statue at the Coast Guard Training Center in Cape May, New Jersey. Every recruit hears his story. Every cadet learns his name. Even the Marine Corps honors him. His name and the Coast Guard emblem are etched into the Wall of Heroes at Quantico, making him the only non-Marine ever given that distinction. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Douglas Munro's story is one of courage, sacrifice, and service without hesitation. If it moved you, drop a like and let us know what you think in the comments. Do you think Douglas Munro is the most underrated hero of World War II? Should more Americans know what the Coast Guard did at Guadalcanal and beyond? We want to hear your take. A special thanks to the men and women of the United States Coast Guard, past and present, who carry on Munro's legacy every day. If you'd like to support our work, consider subscribing and sharing this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, not all heroes wear the uniform you expect. But the real ones never hesitate. You'll find links in the description to official sources, recommended books, and more stories like this one, including Douglas Munro's Medal of Honor citation, Coast Guard archives, and first-hand accounts from Guadalcanal. Thanks for being part of keeping history alive. Semper Paratus.